Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel, Sabaton Army. We got another good one for you today. This is another request out of the comments section. Tonight we're going to be checking out Hearts of Iron. This was requested by Zagdpanzer 4, Bond Houdet, and Mad Dog the First. They all were the ones who requested this and made it to my list. I'm sure many others of you have requested it, but those are the ones who I wrote down. So shout out to those guys or gals. Could be gals, I don't know. We're going to be checking out the Sabaton Hearts of Iron lyric video first. I could not find a live version of this song, which tells me one of two things. Either A, it's not a good song, or B, it's a really super depressing song. Normally all the super depressing Sabaton songs don't get done during the live performances. So I'll have to prepare myself for that. And as you all know, we're going to end these deep dives with a look at the Sabaton history. So let's go ahead and get ready to jump into Hearts of Iron. This is going to be the lyric video. And before we get in there, as you all know, same old. Like, comment, subscribe, join the Patreon if you want to help support the channel. I appreciate it. And now we're going to jump into it. This is Hearts of Iron by Sabaton, off the Heroes album. I love the Heroes album. Is it just me, or does this have a little bit of 40-1 in it as far as the melody, how the chorus goes there? Na 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 na. Huh. I think what this is about, if I'm reading this right. Actually, let me hear one more verse before I say what I think this is about. I might be wrong. It's the end of World War II, and the fronts are closing in. I'm guessing this is Berlin.
Survive and who will die, up to Greece cliff to decide. Those who made it cross without a loss have reason to reflect. It is not about Berlin, it is not about the Reich. It's about the men who fought for them. What peace can they expect? It's the end of the war. Reach for endless joy.
Okay, yeah, so I think this is about the last survivors in Berlin. As all the fronts were closing in on them, it just said they were surrendering to the West. This must be the story of the last survivors of Berlin before the, how's it go? Arterio Dominatus, during the Russian takeover of Berlin. This is the story from the other side of the Germans who were trying to get out of Berlin and survive the invasion from the Russians. I think that's what this is. They wanted to survive to the Americans to the west, I guess, because the Russians were pretty brutal with the Germans who took part in the war, during the war, because of the Russians. From what I learned in Artero Dominatus, the Russians were pretty pissed off about all the atrocities that were done against the Russians when the Germans pushed into Russia, and a lot of the soldiers took it out on the civilian population once they took Berlin over. So I'm sure that's what these folks were trying to flee from.
See the city burn on the other side, going down in flames as the words collide. Who can now look back with a sense of pride? On the other shore, there's the end of the war. See the city burn on the other side, going down in flames as the words collide. Who can now look back with a sense of pride? On the other shore, there's the end of the war.
I know this guitar solo is something famous. I don't know what it is, but I've definitely heard it before. It's a cover of something. Yeah. I imagine one day they'll do a like a made for Broadway type musical with Sabaton music to tell the story of the war. Maybe they'll do two of them, one for World War One, one for World War Two, whatever. And even though some of these songs are not headliners, they're fillers that are necessary to tell both sides of the story. So this was a tough time, man. This was a real tough time, especially for those Germans who were in Berlin, just doing what they can to survive and make it through the war. And for those that were lucky enough to not face the wrath of the Russian army when they got into Berlin, I'm sure they were happy to surrender to the West. All right, let's jump over and check out the Sabaton history. This is Hearts of Iron, the Battle of Berlin, Sabaton history number 17, with Par and Indy once again. So here we go.
I'm Indy Nidell.
I'm Per from Sabaton, and this is Sabaton History.
A German soldier defying Hitler's orders might sound dangerous to you, and it was, but for one man, it was necessary to save many lives.
And we were looking for a story where the Germans was not always the bad guys.
A story which I'm going to tell you right now, and then Per's going to tell you about the song. From the beginning of the Soviet Union's final World War II offensive towards Berlin on April 16, 1945, the situation on the Eastern Front had deteriorated rapidly for the Germans. By the 22nd, Soviet tank...
I never would have been able to tell you all the stuff I know about this if I hadn't have already listened to Arturo Dominakis. So, I might sound like I'm a great historian or something, but everything I learned about this prior to hearing this song, I learned from Sabaton. So, I'm not going to try and pretend like I'm some great historian who, He's trying to educate the world like Sabaton is. I'm just regurgitating what I learned watching Artero Dominatos.
Corps spearheads were already starting to surround Berlin from the north and the south. With the encirclement of Berlin soon at hand, German high command from the bunkers under the city center were calling for immediate assistance. The 12th Army, under General of the Panzertruppe Walter Wenck, had just retreated east of the Elbe at this point, fighting a losing battle against the American advance from the west. Now beyond the river, they could make a stand while providing a tactical reserve against that advance. But the Fuhrer's orders changed their enemies. Now, Wenck's 12th was ordered to strike to the east, into the Soviet flanks, and to relieve Berlin. However, what was called an army, a corps, or even a detachment this late in the war was often nothing more than a mixed group of veterans, stragglers, wounded, and conscripted youngsters and middle-aged and even old men. Wenck's 12th had a large group of basically kids from the Hitler Youth, young men who hadn't finished school, and they were now tasked with taking on Russian tanks. According to General Feldmarschall Wilhelm Keitel, they were to unite with additional Panzer Corps, Tank Corps, under General Felix Steiner to the north, while the trapped 9th Army would make a break to the west and join them. Together, they were to relieve the capital from the Soviets, who had over 1 million men advancing. It was a plan, at least, but one that only existed on paper. Wenck's army had only recently been reorganized with men from all branches that could still fight. That was the only requirement. But even this late in the war, the German army was still able and reliable, and they still had fight in them even in a futile battle. The army's diaries of this day read, "No deserters, no prisoners, no missing."
Could ever have believed? Seems like nothing's been achieved. Just to walk a day, go all the way. The fronts are closing in as the end is drawing near. The 12th Army interfere. Open up around, get people out. Its forces spread out there.
The 12th Army was heading to Berlin. They had only a few vehicles and tanks, mostly mobile assault guns, and little fuel, so the men had to make the 150 kilometers to Berlin on foot.
Wow.
By the 25th, they had reached the outskirts of Berlin, but the situation had worsened dramatically. The Soviets were already south of Potsdam and east of Brandenburg an der Havel, west of Berlin. The surrounding of the capital was nearly complete, and the Soviet forces were much stronger than anticipated. While examining his maps, General Wenck hesitated. Was relieving Berlin even possible at this point? In talks with Keitel, though, the orders from the bunkers under Berlin were clear. Get the Fuhrer out. His destiny is Germany's destiny. Only you, Wenck, only you have the power to save Germany now. So Wenck went to work. The only chance to relieve Berlin at this stage was to split his troops towards the north and south and relieve as many of the defending German forces around Berlin as possible so they could make up a small reserve for an attack towards Berlin itself. This would maybe destroy enough Soviet forces or just hold them back enough to give Berlin some breathing space and for civilian refugees to escape the city. But even that would only be temporary. But Keitel rejected this plan. Berlin itself had highest priority. A push toward the Fuhrer must be done immediately, and that's it. Well, Wenck knew that this would quickly be the suicide of his army, and he realized that German high command had totally lost touch with the situation and the reality of the war. Steiner's tanks in the north were already being pushed back, and the 9th was fighting for its life. In this situation, Wenck chose not to follow the direct orders from Adolf Hitler himself. Instead, he, quote, had to follow the guideline of his conscience. Saving Berlin was impossible. The only thing his army could maybe achieve was getting as many people away from the Soviet advance as possible. By attacking towards Potsdam, he would relieve the encircled garrison there. And by creating a corridor from there towards Berlin, they'd be able to let refugees flee the city. An attack to the south would give the 9th Army a chance to join their lines. Wenck called this his Rettungswerk, pretty much his rescue mission. Only on this would he gamble the lives of his young soldiers. In the early morning hours of April 26, the final German offensive of the war began.
Who'll survive and who will die? Up to Greece cliff to decide. Those who made it cross without a loss have reason to reflect. It is not about Berlin. It is not about the Reich. It's about the men who fought for them. What peace can they expect?
Elements of the 12th Army made their way northeast. The key to their advance was the infantry division Hutten, hardcore veterans who had just days before recaptured Wittenberg from the Soviets and held off overwhelming forces for days. Now they were the wedge that drove into the Soviet positions with artillery and tank hunters. The Soviets were totally caught off guard by the attack, and by midday, the 12th Army had advanced 18 kilometers toward the city of Belitz. On Hutten's flank were the elite Scharnhorst Grenadiers, who pushed down the Autobahn through the night, throwing themselves against the tenacious Soviet defense. House-to-house fighting against superior heavy tanks was vicious and costly, and they often had to resort to close-range attacks with Panzerfausts, single-shot anti-tank guns. They went days without sleep or sufficient food, while the Soviets were constantly reinforced, but despite heavy casualties, they made progress towards Berlin. By May 1st, the 9th Army had managed to use the momentum of the 12th and break out of their encirclement. Spirits rose as the exhausted soldiers of the 9th and the hundreds of civilians with them joined the 12th. But seeing the ragged and wounded men limping into his ranks, Wenck marveled at Hitler's insane plan to fight the Soviets head on. The 9th had been nearly destroyed just fighting for its survival and the survival of the many civilians in its midst. Other fighting forces were able to link up with Wenck as well. And the same day, Hutten reached a large German military hospital near Potsdam. Once more, the fighting was brutal as they stormed the Soviet trenches, but for 24 hours, they were able to get many hundreds of wounded soldiers, nurses, and Red Cross personnel out before the Soviets could return. This was the very end of the European part of the war, and it is difficult to find and follow the reports from the last days of the fighting around Berlin. The Germans did not make many records. The Americans also often didn't record a lot of it, and the Soviet archives are still not fully available. Neither Steiner nor Wenck reached Berlin, though, and Hitler chose suicide over capture in his bunker.
It's the end of the war. Reach for endless joy.
On May the 2nd, Wenck's army retreated. It would protect the refugees and bring them across the Elbe and into American custody. Day and night they marched, avoiding contact with the enemy from the east as long as possible. Soviet pursuit, though, was initially weak, as they were concentrating on taking Berlin. On the 3rd, Wenck made contact with American General William Simpson of the 102nd U.S. Infantry Division of the 9th U.S. Army near Tangermunde. Now, the Allies had agreed among themselves that either the German army would capitulate as a whole, or that small groups could capitulate to them individually via their commanding officers. But there was a hitch. This partial capitulation could only happen to the opponent they're actually engaged with, which for Wenck was the Soviets. To surrender to the Americans, Wenck technically would have to attack them and then surrender. Well, the Americans simply kept silent in regard to the surrender proposal. They did not fire on the advancing Germans either, in violation of the Allied contract. Still, General Simpson let the wounded cross the river, but only with just enough medical supplies for them. Same with Wenck's soldiers and their personal provisions, but he would not allow civilians to cross. Men were even sent out with whips on the partially collapsed bridge to hold back civilians trying to cross with the soldiers. It could have been more of a human tragedy were it not for sudden Soviet fire that rocked the remnants of the bridge. This killed several American soldiers, so a 2-kilometer retreat from the river was ordered. This allowed civilians to cross the river. Wenck's army soon had to fight the Soviets, though, who had renewed their attacks once they realized what was going on. With each break in the lines, Wenck had to order young men to their deaths to recapture and hold positions for just an hour or two so that others could live. It was a final act of self-sacrifice in a war that was essentially over. As the last German grenades were shot, The last artillery pieces and the last tanks were blown up. And then the last German soldiers, among them General Walter Wenck himself, crossed the river and entered American captivity. In the end, thousands of soldiers, civilians, nurses, women, children, and the elderly were saved from the fall of Berlin. As an end note here, on the 8th of May, as the very end came, many men and women attached to the 9th Army were extradited back to the Soviets. To this day, we don't know the exact reasons for that, though we do know that there were several suicides to escape that fate.
Wow. So the people would rather kill themselves than have to go face the wrath of the Russian army trying to get revenge for what was done to them during the war. That's terrible. This is the part of the war you really don't hear about too much, is all the atrocities that were done by the winning side before it all ended. So, that's a hard one.
On the other side, going down in flames as two worlds collide. Who can now look back with a sense of pride? On the other shore, there's the end of the war.
Now, you said that this song was inspired by a video game. Can you dig into that?
Yeah, there's a game called Hearts of Iron.
Right.
So, and we have a song called Hearts of Iron. So there's obviously a connection there.
Right.
So many years ago, when we had a concert in Stockholm, we were approached at an after party by people from this Swedish development studio of games called Paradox.
Right.
And some of the guys came and they said that they were big fans of us and they really appreciate the work that we are doing with writing music about history. And we started to talk about that we are doing pretty much the same thing. I mean, they are doing games about history and we are doing music about it. They asked us, is there any way that you can like write a song that would be like a lead theme for our game that is coming? And we said, okay. And when we were researching, we came across the story about Walter Wenck, and it took a while to keep discussing and developing the idea. We did other things connected to this, and inside of Hearts of Iron, there is released now soundtrack of Sabaton. Okay. So it was possible to get the music, our songs, when you play the game. It's pretty funny actually today, but a lot of our fans in China discovered Sabaton through the game Hearts of Iron. Okay. When we speak sometimes with developers of games, they often talk about how important music is inside of that. Game, sure. And it's pretty funny because for a lot of people today, music is not important anymore. I mean, you see the whole industry of music taking a big tough hit, and people are not as willing to pay for music as they used to be.
Well, there you have it, Hearts of Iron 4 featuring Sabaton music, and that was all for today with Hearts of Iron.
Sabaton History channel. Alright, thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to the Sabaton History channel, check out Indie's other channels, and support us on Patreon, because that's what makes this happen.
Alright, Hearts of Iron. This is another one that's it falls into a weird territory with me as far as Sabaton songs go. I can understand why they don't really play this one live. It's one of those songs that has an important message, but it's really not a upbeat song that's you can really jam out to. One thing that I've learned since I've started this journey of delving into Sabaton's music, one of the most important things I've learned is that the people of Germany were not all Nazis. They were not all evil people. A lot of them were just people that got caught up in the war as a result of their government doing what it did. And, hearing songs like this one here, where you get to see some of the humanity that was shown, and instead of choosing to take more lives, this guy made the right choice to try and save lives, and he saved about 250,000 of them for what they were saying, and that's commendable. That's commendable. I mean, at least at the end of the war, when he looks back on his part of it, he'll at least be able to look at the lives that he saved, and that's commendable for him. So, To all of our German brothers and sisters out there, I have learned that lesson, and I'm starting to change my philosophy when it comes to how I look at the Germans during World War II. I mean, there were some that were really shitty, evil motherfuckers, but not all of them. There were a lot of heroes. There were a lot of people that got swept up into the fight who really didn't want to be part of it, and they were happy that it was over and that all the death and destruction was coming to an end. So shout out to all those folks who stuck through it and didn't act as evil like the rest of them. So that's it for this video. This wasn't really an upbeat one. I apologize for that, but it's a necessary one. Got a lot of requests for it, so I wanted to make sure I covered it. I knew by the amount of requests I got that this had to be an important song for history. So if you're liking these deep dives into these songs, give me a like down below. It really helps the channel, helps churn out the video to more and more people, get Sabaton's message out there to the world. If you want to come along for the ride and subscribe to the channel, there's a big red button down there. Hit that notification bell to let you know anytime I drop some new content. And if you're interested in supporting the channel financially, $1 a month will get you early access to all the videos that I've already recorded, edited, and are queued up and ready to go to YouTube. So if you come on over and join the Patreon, you'll have access to all of that. You'll be able to participate in voting to determine what I'll be reacting to next. And, you'll get a little bit more access to me and be able to chit-chat with me a little more. So if that's what you want, come on over to the Patreon. There's a link down below in the description. There's a link up here in the corner you can click on, take you over there, and I'll appreciate every minute of it. So, hey, that's all I got for this one for today. I appreciate you stopping by, and don't forget to come on back.